Hello, everybody. This is James Bone, Discovered, dedicated to original peoples as always. And we've got two special guests on today, Terence Smalls and Errol Green. Welcome to the show, my brothers.
Yo, what's happening, James?
Great to have you both on. Now, today it's just a basic discussion of spirituality, religion, and science. Now, the reason for these topics, Terence, he subscribes to a lot of the science. Also, we've got Errol, Orthodox Christian, and myself, I connect with African spirituality. So we're going to see where this discussion goes. It's like a three-way discussion, open discussion, and let's see where we go. So if you can introduce yourself, any one of you first?
Yeah, so I'm Terence Small, and I've been on a couple of times before. I think I've done an evolution debate with Joe back in the day. So yeah, basically I'm representing, for the science, but at the same time I understand it's got limitations. Definitely. Respect to spirituality and religion always, man.
Okay. Errol?
Yeah. Greetings, people. And yeah, I've been on a few times talking about different topics, from my trip to Ethiopia, the Orthodox Church, Ethiopian Orthodox Church, African history, sound system culture. So yeah, just ready to take part in the conversation and see where we go with it,
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'm always on the indigenous stuff, and I'm always trying to look at the history, and I also with spirituality, it's I don't see it as even a beginning to it. It's not like I feel like we can give a date like this. This is when African spirituality started. I don't see it. I see spirituality. It's always been there, even before the physical. So there's a lot of things that we can all relate to, and we're gonna see like where we go from here. So, Terence, give us a little description of, like, from the perspective you're coming on as the beginning.
Do you mean as the beginning as the creation also, or like
the creation? Yeah.
Well, I start with the Big Bang as the best explanation for the origin of the universe. It all began, when the Big Bang is a rapid expansion. Everything that exists in the universe today was densely compacted into a small space. Something happened to make it expand. You know what I mean? So I go with that as something that's a knowledge claim. I believe that we can make knowledge claims about that. But as for what happened before, I think it's as we discussed in WhatsApp a few weeks ago, I think it's a mystery, man. What come before the Big Bang? Some people say, we might never know what came before it. Some people say, they know what came before it. And so it's definitely a contentious question, that what came before the Big Bang, but it's a good one. But for me, I embrace it as a mystery, definitely.
Okay, yeah. All right, Errol. So give us a description of the beginning from your perspective.
There has to be a prime. Sorry, there has to be a prime mover.
Yeah.
There has to be something that caused that bang. A bang can't just happen by itself. So there has to be a prime mover, There has to be something or someone or some entity that caused all into being, to what we have today. From Terence mentioned the universe, but when he says the universe, to me that encompasses the universe as we look up into the heavens, and mankind and all what we see on the earth, so encompass everything. So there has to be a prime mover.
Yeah, interesting. Now, I definitely connect to both of you in different ways as well, and also I see things from a different perspective myself. Now, first of all, I speak on like where some of the people from Kemet and certain other parts of Africa, like a similar type of spirituality, but also the God thing. Now, one thing with Africa, because it's such a massive continent, so you've got to understand diversity in different ways, as far as spirituality. And I think with what it is you do find a supreme being, a beginning, a God. Different languages use different names. Oludamari with the Yoruba, for example. Now, then obviously you get a lot of other little gods, lesser gods, and stuff like that. But you find this everywhere. Like in most indigenous cultures, you'll find that like there's a supreme being ruling over all, created all, and also, there's these lesser gods. Now, the lesser gods can be misinterpreted because remember, a lot of things what we learn come from Western perspective. So when we get the Western perspective, it's their perspective. Do you get what I'm saying? So indigenous peoples, like it seems that, yes, they are in touch with nature. Yes, they had some say animism, where they believe that every living thing has a soul, trees, rocks, water, everything. So yes, there's like the mystery of God, though, and this is where I'm going to come to you now, Terence. Now, is there a way that you can see the possibility of a God, or does it seem impossible to you? I mean, like Errol said before there was a bang. Now, what do you think? Where can we go with that?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with what Errol said to a degree in the sense that there has to be something before it, because you need every reaction as an action. You know what I mean? Every action has a reaction. So for something to bang, you need some kind of an agent to make it bang. So the only thing I disagree on is defining it. Defining it, like whether it be a god or whether it be people posit, all kinds of different things like aliens and stuff like that, and other theories. But I'm just happy to say, I think I'm pretty sure that obviously, well, not obviously, but again, it's a bit sketchy, but I think there was something there before, but I can't define it. You know what I mean? I can't define it as a god, especially in the traditional sense, as a creator kind of thing. So yeah, basically.
Okay. Yeah, Errol. So, what do you think of the science, for example? Do you see any good in the science, even though, for example, some things could contradict, but what you see good in the science?
Science is science. There's no good and bad in science. Science just shows us the facts of how of what happens. Science is a man impregnates a woman and we get a child. That's science. The study of human reactions and the things that we study and we learn about how life evolves and how life comes to be. And and we ourselves as human beings put purpose on life. If, like what Terence said, now there has to be something before, and then he kind of said, and aliens, but the aliens would still have to be they would either be the prime mover or somebody prime move them. You understand? So I go back to the same thing again. There has to be a prime mover, and there has to be a purpose. There has to be a why and a purpose. Why do we have life? What is the purpose of life? Because it still comes back to these questions. Are we just here to just be here without any particular purpose? Why do we have laws? Why do we punish? Why do we have retribution? You understand? So therefore, man realizes within his own conscience there's a purpose to life, and there's a reason for life. Therefore, we make, regardless of where we are, we have these beliefs and these like when you talked about before animism, right? That's found in every culture.
Yeah.
And when you say indigenous or original people, that's found even in Europe because they have their originality.
Yeah.
They are original to Europe. And they have animism. We see a lot of that coming back into society now with Wicca and all this type of stuff, which is, very much a European, the winter solstice and all of these type of things. But that's even found in Africa as well. So we find that animism and the worship of everything has a purpose and a life to it. We as Christians, we say that God sustains everything he has created. Do you understand? Not that everything itself created itself. And, to an extent, everything does have a soul because soul means life.
Yeah.
You understand? So in that sense, everything is of value in this universe, in this world, that holds it together, you know. But to me, it's the same. Going back to the question, you have a watch, you must have a watchmaker that puts all the mechanisms into place so that the watch can tick and keep good time. And that's how we see the universe and life progressing. Something made it that it's now ticking over and producing life, animal life, plant life, human life, sun, moon, star, days, years, months, rain. You know, all of these things that are happening had something that said, okay, be, and it must continue, you know?
What's interesting is we've spoke a few times, but I've mentioned about energy and spirit. And I spoke to a few different guests I've had on about this as well, who specialize in spirituality. So now how they put it is, you know, this, they represent science. You know, the Egyptian, they was about science, but they was also about spirituality as well. And it was like the two went hand to hand. And it's like energy and spirit. So where we were able to like reason on it is the fact that if we're speaking to a person religious or spirituality, we might use the word spirit more. For example, if we're speaking to someone of science, we might use the word energy. But there's kind of like a connection, because if we're talking on God, now nobody's ever actually seen God. Do you know what I'm saying? So I mean, I've never met anybody who's met God, but it doesn't rule out any possibility that God don't exist. That's not even where I'm coming from. So, you know, it's not a simple discussion, God. It's, to me, it's like what you know, you can feel, and you can see the work of the creator around you through nature, you know. So that's all I'd like to say on God, basically. And no likeness, by the way. Some people like, you know, for example, you could see the Hindus, for example, they used to have their Buddhas depicted as, the first ones we depicted as black people. Then later on, when it reached China, the Buddha, they wanted it to look like them, the gold Buddha, and you know what I mean? So you will see different people, like people depicting white Jesus, for example. But that's just people trying to relate their culture to that. People like, it's like everyone wants a likeness of God. Everyone wants God to, like, well, God was black, God was this, God was that. But God is spirit, energy. And that's why I say energy or spirit. You know, so.
Well, someone said, I heard someone say the other day on Facebook, people who were, you know, arguing over the color of God, over the skin color, they're basically looking for a cult leader. You know what I mean? Someone that you can relate to on an identitarian grounds. I think that's accurate.
Yeah, without a doubt, because
yep.
Like you say, that you're talking about God, and God has, even if we take out the word God and we're talking about spirituality, you know, you're talking about the spirit. Spirituality must suggest that there's one main spirit that people who claim to be spiritual are trying to tap into. This is what we know as the word God, or the creator, or the sustainer, or whatever. But at the same time, I think sometimes it can get semantics with religion, spirituality, science, which, like you said before, from our perspective as an Orthodox Christian, God is a mystery. Nobody can define God or what God is. But what we know God by is energies, okay? By what we see in creation, you know? And even metaphysically, if we look up the word spirit, it can be defined as wind or air, which is a form of energy that we keep talking about, you know? So therefore, we're all talking about the same thing. We're calling it by different names: spirit, you know, energy, air, wind, So we have all of these descriptions, and we can't even describe them things because one, you can't see air, one, you can't, we have breath and air in us, but we can't see it. And when you check it, the most important thing in us is the invisible part of us, because the air that keeps us alive, you cannot see, but you can see the reaction. You can't see the wind blowing, but you can see the effect of the wind that blows. You understand? So we have that same wind or air within us that sustains us, that we could have this Zoom meeting today and speak to one another, and that's an invisible entity that is more powerful than what we can see physically.
Yeah.
So, and this is what we're calling spirit. And I think most people would agree. But I think in the world that we live in today, in this modern world that we live in today, I think people take things out of context and say things like, oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. But what they're really saying, especially in a Western context, is that I'm not Roman Catholic, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Jew.
Yeah.
So they're really looking at them, what we call the Abrahamic religions that seem to have dominated the Western world that we know now. And now, obviously, you've got a bit of the East with Islam in there, Judaism. So people are really saying, it's that what I'm rejecting,
Yeah.
So,
I think
what they call institutional religion.
Yeah, like organized. A lot of them still believe in God, don't they? But they try and get away from, doctrines and stuff like that. And like you said, organized religion. They want to get away from that, but keep the parts that they like, I guess.
Yes, very, very selective.
Yeah. No, I understand where he's coming from and that. Yeah. I mean, I see like spirituality as the beginning. I see it as like you have the tree and then you've got the branches. So with spirituality, for example, I could go to a church, for example. I could go to a mosque, I could go to a synagogue, and I could do a whole lot more outside of that as well. I don't see a limitation. Now, what the problem is I was watching something the other day, actually, it was interesting. And of this discussion that there's never been a proper definition, like, on what spirituality is. And it's been difficult for a lot of different people to break down a universal spirituality, because everyone can have their own. You can have your own individual spirituality. Could be walking through a park in peace, inner peace. You're not thinking of time, no worries. You just, because I think also is what affects us from our spirituality is what we've got to look at also. And it's all what we see around us. There's a lot of negativity that we're exposed to, whether it's from the TV, or people just going along with stuff. So, so spirituality, like I say, it's I'd say I see myself as a free spirit. So basically, I go anywhere in the world, for example, and I look for the most ancient type of people with the most oldest type of stories, through history, whether it be documented or oral history. And you get different perspective. You could, like, for example, speak on a lot of indigenous peoples who have a similar story about a flood, a flood story. So you've got to, like, sometimes ask yourself, like, well, let's look at the similarities amongst the world rather than the differences amongst the world. So you start looking at similarities, then you start finding, wow, it's like almost like this big connection. And is the connection just by accident, or is it by design?
Yeah, it's a good question, because, like you say, it's the first time in human history that people don't believe in a God or don't believe in things spiritual. Because people might say they're spiritual, but have no real spiritual practices.
Yeah.
You understand? They might say, oh, yeah, I'm spiritual, I'm blah, 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 but they don't really connect to anything,
Yeah.
They just say it because of a want of a word, because like I say, they're rejecting what they see as institutional religion, you
Yeah.
know, almost like institutional racism. They don't want it. They don't want that label. So, you know, people just say things like, "Oh, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religion. I'm not religious." But to me,
Yeah.
religion means a way of life. And
Mm.
in that way of life, you have to have spiritual practices.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, I don't define religion and spirituality as two different things. I see that a religious person will have his spiritual practices to keep him adhered to his religion.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like a
Understand?
religious person can be spiritual, but it wouldn't necessarily work the other way around, where a spiritual person would be religious. But all religious people are spiritual, though, aren't you? That's true, what you're saying.
Yeah, but religion means to bind. Okay, the word religion, if you look it up, it means to bind together. Therefore, people who claim to be spiritual are doing the same thing. They're binding together.
Yeah,
You see what
true.
I'm saying? They're using them. Spirituality to me is a practice of your religion. That's how I define it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I know people don't like the word religion because of what the last 500 years of history has done.
Yeah.
So people are always running away from that word religion. But religion is not really a bad word. Just get a dictionary and you'll see there's nothing bad about the word religion. To me now, spirituality has become like a trend. Like, I'm a vegan, I'm a
Yeah. Yeah.
vegetarian,
That's
I'm
right.
you know, and it's
Yeah.
like a trend,
Yeah. I
you
agree with
know,
you there, brother. I think
and
it
and
is.
there's
Yeah.
no real essence to
Yeah.
people, you know, of what they're really saying. Oh, I'm spiritual. Well, what does that encompass? What
Well, you
does
know
it
what?
really mean?
Well, you know what it is? It's the new age thing now, which you've got
Mm-hmm.
all these people. You go on YouTube, for example, you find them everywhere now. Everybody is spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody
Mm-hmm.
tells you to manifest. You could manifest and you can have what you want. You know, this is
Yeah.
like the new age style now. The books like The
Mm-hmm.
Secret, you know, about these
Mm-hmm.
books where, just visualize and you'll get it. Ask the universe and they will deliver. So this
Yeah.
is part of this new age, and people are taking this on like a religion.
There's
It's
no
like,
definition. There's no definition for spirituality, is there? Everyone you bump into's got a different idea and they're doing different things. That's the only thing that annoys me about it. At least with
Yeah.
Christianity, I know what people are
but you
talking
know
about.
what though? But what
At
I'll
least I know
say
what
to
people are
that,
talking about with Islam as well. But when it comes to spirituality, everyone
it's
seems
true
to
though
have
what
their
you're
own
saying. It's
approach.
true, but that's true though, because you can't just. I used to think to myself, oh, this is what spiritual is, but then I actually really think about it and look at it from a universal perspective and beyond, because we can't see everything. There's all things around us in higher dimensions. We can only see what we can see, 3D. So there's all sorts of things, man. And then you can call it energy, you can call it spirit, whatever you want to call it. But I definitely do believe that there's a whole lot more to we as human beings. We know very, very little compared to like what is exactly out there. So I can see why these guides are there.
Good. Let's try and define up some things then, because to me, if I do an act of charity, or not me then, if a person does an act of charity, like going out and feeding the poor out of their own pocket, committing their own self-sacrifice to help people in need, would you define that as a spiritual act? Because I would.
I would, yeah, yeah. I think that's a brilliant point you've just made. Definitely.
You see what I'm saying? So what I'm talking about is when people say that they're spiritual, would you define praying as a spiritual act? Because I
Yeah,
would.
yeah.
Yeah, I would, yeah.
But also, I would include also meditation, because
Yes.
meditation,
Well, praying is a form of meditation.
yeah, praying seems like you're talking to God. Meditation, you're listening to God.
These are spiritual acts.
Yeah,
Meditation is a spiritual act.
yeah.
You know,
That's right. Yeah.
but then people have different ways of what they see as meditation.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Some people think meditation is to clear the mind, to think of nothing, to let it all out and have nothing in there. But like I say, if we're talking about spirituality and spirit, we know that there's a spirit will.
This is an important topic. This, I mean, you know, I don't want any listeners to overlook some of the discussions, what we're speaking on. You know, some people believe it's one definition of spirituality. Some can see it's like multiple definitions, and then you can look at who defines it. So if we can continue on where we left off anyway, and you know, I'm looking at this whole universe, not just the God mystery, the whole universe as a mystery and beyond, higher dimensions. You know, we have very limited scope of what is out there. But I think the truth is within us, though. And it's tapping into your inner peace, your inner truth as well. You know, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, I know if you continue where we left off.
When we were talking about acts of, well, I was saying what defines spirituality, because we're trying to make a form of definition here now.
Yeah.
And spiritual, like for instance, whereas we as Christians, we call it the fruits of the spirit. Okay. So most people would agree that when they say they're spiritual and they're into spirituality, they say then it's all about love. Now, this is what we learn from the scriptures as well. The fruits of the spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. You know, these are some of the fruits of we see as living a spiritual life. Okay. So, you know, most people say that the spiritual and all you want to talk about is, oh, I love everybody. It's just love, 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 love. But I don't think they understand that the ammunition that you need that comes with love is all the other things that I've just spoken about: long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, you know, so that we can live side by side with neighbor.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Stronger communities.
So, yes, man. So this is part of communal, because to us, everything is spiritual, because we live in a world that is created by that one spirit, you know, that we cannot see. But, you know, we all have our interpretations of how that invisible mystery has been revealed to us. Because we say that God is visible, invisible yet visible. God is far yet near. You understand? Because we do have the energies, and we say we're created in the image and likeness of God. That's in our potential, in our administration of our lives, to have goodness, to have kindness, to have faithfulness, to be gentle, to have self-control. All of these things that we say that God hasn't given man as qualities, you know.
And I think like the one God thing as well, you know, like because people look at, like, say, dates of when, say, certain religions came on the scene, for example. So some people might look and think, well, this is like no more than a 6,000-year-old story. If you put it in the order of, for example, I know you don't subscribe to the 6,000-year, the world 6,000 something years old, Errol. Some Christians subscribe to that the world is 6,000 something years old.
Well, I don't know no Christians to describe to that, really. I mean, I think what they're trying to say is that when people are reading scripture and they see it from Adam unto Christ,
it's the timeline,
you know, it's 4,000 years and we're 2,000 years after. So, you know, that's how they come to this 6,000 year. You know, but that's a whole another argument again in terms of interpretation.
No, reason why I brought that up. Reason why I brought it up was because if I look at, like, the one God thing now, and you probably relate to this as well, where you're obviously aware, because you obviously have looked at history also, you're aware like of life beginning in Africa, for example. So with Africa being the birthplace, for example, then there must have been one God in the beginning, you know, and people, only people would be in Africa, for example. Now that's scientifically, that's science, that's this, that says this. You know, it's at the end of the day, whose life began in Africa, and you know, everybody was. Sorry, Terence.
We've got Akhenaten, haven't we, in Egypt, definitely.
Well, this is
And
why. Well, I'm
one of
happy
the
you brought
oldest.
up his name. I'm happy you mentioned Akhenaten, because I was coming to that to say he was bringing one God, the God, one God concept back. So now, even though,
so it wasn't original. It wasn't original with him. He was bringing it back in from
yeah. Because some people see that, no, they just worship hundreds of gods. Because you know, you do see a lot of different deities, whether it's Kemet, whether it's any part of Africa and other parts of the world. But at the same time, no one really paid attention to this supreme being that was amongst all peoples at one time. You know. So can you see it? So what I mean is like, when Africans, even when Christianity was coming into Africa, or for example, Islam or any of them, no African was surprised that there's one God worship. It was not a surprise for them, you know, like that people believe in one God.
That's a good point, because I think, you see, the way we see the revelation.
Yeah.
Okay, because what we're seeing is what we believe in as Orthodox Christians is that God's revelation is coming through man. Man starts off like an infant, and he begins to learn, and he becomes an adult. He go through adolescence. You know, these are the stages. You even describe it in evolution to an extent. You know, primitive man, he's getting more experience and blah, 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 and so on. Well, it's a similar thing. So we say that a lot of the ancient religions were really getting man ready for that revelation that would enter. Because, for instance, as you know, in Egypt, they already had the concept of a virgin giving birth to a god.
Yeah.
So therefore, Christianity was well acceptable when it came. They already had an idea of a supreme being.
Yeah.
And that you had to pay for your sins. You know, where they weighed your heart with the feather of truth. So they already had these concepts. You know, so sometimes I think, are we defining which is the true spirituality by its age or by its context? Because the older it is, sometimes for some people say, well, I'm going back to the original. Okay, but what is the original? And in terms of the people who believed in some of the ancient stuff is no longer with us today. Like, for instance, Egyptian religion and even religions before them is not with us today. There's no one who knows the actual tenets of them practices in their full entirety. We can study what we know about Egypt and some of the things that they believe in, with the burial chambers and all of the philosophies and some of the stuff that we find within the Book of the Dead and stuff like that. But, you know, if people want to practice that today, they're going to take it totally out of context, because time has changed so dramatically.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I was. Sorry, this is what I was saying to
Dibs.
This is what I was saying to Dibs. The week, if we look at the human timeline that's accepted by science, and it's pretty much a consensus that humans have been around for like 200,000 years. We don't know what we've lost there in terms of religion and spirituality and what we've maintained. You know what I mean? But like I just said, and you just said, we do see the links between African spirituality and religions coming in. One more concept, the Trinity. When Christianity came into Africa, there was an idea there of three gods. You know what I mean? 3 in 1. It already existed there. So
yeah, that's why I say Africa was quite all-inclusive. I'm not saying every single tribe believed in one God. That would be wrong to like put it like that. There's some that believed in several gods,
Mm.
and some that, you know, at the end of the day, not all spirituality can be perfect too. You know, so there can be stuff that you might not agree with someone's spirituality. I'm talking on terms of rituals, for example. So, you know, there's certain rituals that like are quite known in Africa, circumcision, for example, you know, and then you can see the Hebrews in Kemet, you can see they are being circumcised and shown, because this is like, you know, this cleanliness it was took seriously where, you know, some people who weren't circumcised couldn't even sit amongst them, you know, so it was people seeing things deeply the more further you go back, you know, so, and yet the afterlife, which they spoke on, and yet there is a punishment at the same time, you know, some with religion, they might talk about like hell or like, you know, heaven, but there's always something, because this is just a spacesuit, this physical body to the real world.
I don't mean to cut you, James, but I think the basic thing that we find from most religions, even the ancient religions, is some form of good over evil. Good will triumph over evil ultimately.
Yeah.
Regardless if you believed in 20 gods, a million gods, 50 gods, one
That's
god,
right.
two gods, three
Yeah,
gods.
yeah.
The ultimate battle is that good will triumph over evil. Okay,
That's
give me a second. I got
great
somebody
point,
at my door.
Yeah. No, definitely agree with that point he just made, because even though in Africa you can't find the word devil, but you will always, there's always some form of adversary, you know, yin and yang, opposites, and, you know,
Yeah, that's
so.
right. I don't think you're not going to find any like religion or any spiritual system anywhere that hasn't got like that concept of some kind of good and bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like two people who just can't agree. You know, it's always this. It's like this laws of opposites. You know, so that's how I look at it. You know,
it's all about. I think we need to separate as well. You know, one of the problems I've seen over the last 10 years on the internet is that people are conflating like religion with science, and science, you know, with their philosophy, and I'm mixing them all in together. And I think like they've got a space for them. You know, like each one's got its own space and its own job, and you know what I mean. That's what I believe anyway. But some people feel like, you know, we mix out. Can you really mix science with religion? I don't like. I was saying before, you know, religion and spirituality, fair enough. But when science comes in now, I think, you know, it's difficult to mix them.
You know what, though?
With certain denominations, anyway. You know, we're literalists.
Yeah, I mean, you got your sacred science in it, what some deal with. You know, so it's a deep. You know, there's some things that are so difficult to understand, and sometimes you'd have to grow up in an environment like that, and it'll just be the norm to you. If you get what I'm saying.
Terence, I don't mean to cut you again, James, but I think the point is there is science tells us how things work, not why they work, or not. Science doesn't give us a purpose or a cause. It tells us how things work. That's how I understand science. We study something to see how things work.
Yeah.
You know, not to say science doesn't give us the answer that a theological answer. It can only tell you how things work.
Yeah, that's right.
You know,
it's like, well,
like you say, theology and philosophy are trying to explain the greater part now, because we're able to think. You know, we're able to try and use that rational mind. That's how we develop theology and philosophy, to try and explain these things a little bit more. So I think what early man, even the Greek world, they're looking at science, and the science is making them become more religious, because they're showing you how the things work, and then they have their philosophy and their theology explaining, okay, this is why it works, because there's a prime mover. And that's it seems to be, because this is not a scientific conclusion. This is a theological conclusion and a theological and philosophical conclusion. So that's how we have to make answers. That's how we come to answers. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, because
we have
with
Go on.
with philosophy, I think that's a lot closer to religion, you know, actually, now that you've mentioned it, because philosophy is about you know, how it's not about studying knowledge or facts, you know, like scientists trying to get at the knowledge, you know, what can we learn about the universe? That's what it is, ultimately, what can we learn. But philosophy now, I think, is more closer to, you know, it's more of an understanding, like what should we do, sorry. Like, you know, like you said, the ancient Greeks, they were preoccupied with questions like, you know, how can we create a city, a just city? It seems like a nothing question now, but back when they were considering it, it was really like, it was an important question. How can we create a just city? And that's not really a theological or a science, is it? But it's closer to theology because it talks about morals, you know what I mean, and what's right or so forth. So philosophy is close, man, to religion, I'd say, in that sense, where
and
it's dealing with something.
It encompasses all of them things that you just said. You made a great point there about how we make the perfect city, the perfect society. It encompasses the fruits of the spirit, what we talked about: love, joy, peace, long suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. To have a good society, we need all of them ingredients.
Exactly. And that's got nothing to do with science. That's just pure philosophy and spirituality, isn't it?
Yes. So we cannot separate them because we need each other in order to make the life that we want to make, that utopia, that heaven on earth. Then
well, you know what though, you see, like if you look at, because like when what people perceive as religion, for example, if you look at it like, some people see it spirituality as different again, but it's the book now, because you have a book, for example. Now let's just pick out Rastafari. There's no book with Rasta, is there? But
here's a book with Rasta.
So is there an actual book for all Rastas? One book?
No, well, you see, the thing is, right?
I'm not saying you need a book. I'm not saying you need a book to have a religion. But I think when you have the book there, here you go, is this book. You know what I mean?
I think what the premise you're coming back from is that people think that the book limits a man. Without books, we wouldn't know history.
Yeah.
So that analogy there, where people say, "Oh, it's a 6,000-year-old book. I'm not putting my trust in that," but yet still, you have small little samples of books from the ancient world that people will die for.
Yeah.
Some of them are not even complete. You know, most of the manuscripts we have from the ancient world, from Egypt, from Greece, from Babylon, from Mesopotamia, some of them are fragments.
And the priceless.
And then people surmise so much about these fragments. Like, this is the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And they're not even complete books.
Yeah.
You understand? So people sometimes put their faith in things that are not even complete, but they want to ridicule scripture or the book or whatever. I'm not saying that what you're doing here, but what I'm saying is that don't let the book, because for instance, we use books today. Everything that we use, for instance, how would you know about African civilization if you didn't read Anthony Browder, Van Sertima, Ben Yohanan? It's a book you have to read unless you listen to a lecture.
Well, it depends, because remember, when you got African roots as well, for example, like, don't get on with myself, I had to learn more so about the history of Nigeria, for example. But I was aware of, like, say, they had like a high culture. That's the word actually that was used, high culture. You know, Tao also used that one as well. You know, when you talk about a civilization, a high culture, but basically you'd have to really study it, because it can be passed down orally. So in Africa, for example, you know, if you're born in Africa and you're getting your history passed down orally, you know, well, nowadays you've got books now, so it's even better. You know,
that's kind of the same though. Sorry, Dibs. I mean, it's not obviously, you know, oral versus. And I only come across this a few months ago as well, where I heard oral being described as oral literature. And when the guy explained why he was calling that, he was saying it's because the Africans have recorded it to memory, just in the same way we've recorded it to the book.
Yeah.
You know, because it's been in the tradition for so long.
Yeah.
Like when he was studying the history of African American literature, I didn't think he was going to go into oral traditions, but he started there and he classed it as literature. You know what I mean? So it's like it's codified in a sense. You know what I mean? So it's
When you think of
underestimated.
oral history, think about oral. Everything got to be oral first.
Yeah,
Oral
exactly.
history,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then eventually, and don't forget with oral history, some things can be forgotten as well.
Yeah. Patrick made the same point, didn't he, when he said everything starts with a story before someone writes it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it gets passed down, and then obviously certain tribes who are not disturbed by other tribes, they can preserve something.
Let me cut you before we lose our point, because what he just said, what he clarified, the book. When we're talking about a book, people think that people who are Christians are relying on the book alone.
Yeah.
Yet still before there was a Bible, there was Christians. The first Christians didn't have a Bible. They had the Old Testament, but they didn't have a New Testament. So the oral tradition was the ammunition. The oral tradition, the person of Jesus Christ was their religion, was their emphasis, not the book.
Exactly.
So people use the excuse nowadays and say, oh, the book, your book, your book, your book. But
the book always comes after, then.
Yeah. Our foundation not based on the book. It's based on the traditions that came before the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the difference I see between the Orthodox Church and some of the denominations where they stand on the Bible alone and they don't deal with the church council, they don't deal with the priesthood, they don't deal with all that stuff. And then when you're doing that, then you really are a book guy and you've got nowhere to go. You know what I mean?
You've got nowhere to go, because
but that's a denominational thing, isn't
the whole story.
So because if I can ask you a question,
it was lived out before it was written down.
Exactly.
Errol, so let me ask you a question sort of on this topic. You see where we've got African spirituality and then we've got Christianity. And why I mention Christianity, you're Christian. Can you see that the connection with both of them, like basically seeing Africa as the beginning of all like any kind of spirituality, later on, the making of actual religions where we have a manual now. And don't forget in Kemet, they've written stone.
Yeah, good point.
So that's still, even though it's not a book, it's still principles. You had to, the 42 laws of man, you had to read them like daily, and so there were certain things just like that which existed before Christianity or Hebrew, anything like that. Do you know what I mean? So you can, because if you look at Egypt now, you look at it just like the blueprint. You got everything there, from talking about creation stories, from afterlife to everything, so.
Yes. Even before Egypt, you have Sumeria and the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is older than the Egyptian stories.
Well, this is the discussion. A lot of the Kemetic scholars always say Kemet is older than Sumeria. So this is their thing, you see. Sometimes people lead to Sumeria.
I'm not an archaeology in that perspective.
But besides the point, there's people places before Egypt anyway. Saddam was older than Egypt, so it's not all about Egypt. It's not all about it.
Yeah, true. See, in many ways, the scene is paving the way, aren't they, as well?
It's amazing. The documents in what you see in Egypt is amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's a high culture. It was peak, but it's not the first, and it's not all about it.
No, it's too late, isn't it? It's too late.
There's some of these people, the Kemetic scholars, even, I listen to them myself, but sometimes they get stuck on Egypt. And I feel that puts a limitation on yourself, where the rest of Africa, Congo's got the oldest mathematical tool. You know what I'm saying? Like 25,000, 30,000 years ago. So at the end of the day, mathematics didn't start in Egypt. Science didn't have to only started in Egypt. But it's just what's left of Egypt now, what's standing.
I think they were borrowing off each other. You know, the Egyptians and there's actually some evidence for this, that the Egyptians and Sumerians learnt off each other, whether it was agricultural techniques or whether it was spiritual practices, beliefs. There was a lot of
I can believe that.
cultural exchange going on between them.
Yeah, because neighbours, you know,
Yeah,
you're not
exactly,
really too far, are you?
Yeah.
And when you're trading for years,
Empires.
and you know, that's what makes you see similar spiritualities in the world and similar buildings, monuments, pyramids around the world, and you know, it's come from one idea and it spreads, isn't it? You know, and I think that's the same way. That's how the world goes around. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, so anything else that needs to be added?
I think he was asking me the question about how do I see African spirituality and Christianity.
Yeah, well, I'm happy. I was thinking on my mind, weren't you? You were,
yeah, because I know you can jump, you see, James.
No, I was waiting for you to answer. I was actually waiting for you to answer, but I thought you were ducking the question.
No. I like to stay on track.
Yeah.
You understand? You know, so, and I think sometimes questions like that can be a bit flawed. You understand? Because, you know, spirituality is spirituality, and I'm not defining them between African, and anyone else, because you know, according to science, the world was one. Okay. Before there was a split. So we're all, like we explained before, about these flood stories and these similar stories that we find around the world.
Yeah.
You know, so you can see that every nation had its spirituality.
Yeah.
You know, and it generally seems as if it was all coming from one location and one point in the earth. And then things moved, memories changed and lost. So everyone's got various stories. Like we're talking about the story of Gilgamesh, the story of Noah. We've got a flood story in Egypt. We have them in Mexico, in the Olmecs, in South America, in the Caribbean, in Africa, you know. So we find these similar stories throughout the world.
Yeah.
Of a deluge, then, you know, of a deluge, which,
and we do see.
And you know what you don't find back in the day? You don't find any of these natural philosophies, man. You know, whether it's like atheism or you know, naturalism. Like every single culture is connected in one way or another. You know what I mean? There's no one like, oh, this the nature's laws that exist. I'd like to know when that came in, because that seems like a really late development. You know, this idea of atheism and naturalism and all that, and the philosophies, New Age, like you're saying, the New Age.
But you know what though? When we look at like old traditions of today, we can't find them. I mean, you have the Hadza tribe, for example. You know, in like Tanzania areas, you know, there's still people like, in order for people to continue practicing their spirituality. Remember, when I'm saying spirituality, it's spirituality, your language and your culture is wrapped into it.
Yeah.
So we can't forget about that. You know, we speak in not our indigenous language. You know,
and the way the Hadza preserved it as well, man. It's proper impressive, isn't it? You know, thousands of years.
Yeah. But the only way you can preserve something, remember, the only way you can preserve something if you are more isolated. And I've seen
that's what I was just going to say. They must have been out the way because everyone else kind of is being interrupted, haven't they? You know, it stepped in and history was interrupted, and then new practice.
I mean, I look at these tribes in Asia, like these indigenous, the black folks in Philippines, Thailand, and all these, and these people, they could just give in, say, you know what, let's just go and live amongst everybody. Then what will happen is a generation down the line, and then they're going away from them traditions, and that's just life, you know what I'm saying? But there's still people who are trying to preserve, but it's you know, it's not. Are they able to practice it properly? And I think that they all have limitation on where they can hunt. So even the Maasai tribes, the government has restricted their hunting. So you're putting a limitation on to be spiritual. You can't. It's not nice to have this like limitation on you. You know what I mean? It's expansive, your awareness, your
Yeah, the new
consciousness
all
is
the
out
new
there.
ways, like you're saying, they're trying to like urbanize everywhere, aren't they, and get rid of all the farms and the village, all the old school way of life. It's
Yeah.
kind of like being replaced, slowly by big buildings and thousand
Oh,
cars and all
terrible.
that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Errol, anyway. So, what would you say? If you look at African spirituality as well, like you were saying, and you look at like science as well, for example, where they say first people coming out of Africa, and if you can you make connections to the Bible with the beginning of where the Garden of Eden is?
Well, according to the scripture, the Garden of Eden is the Fertile Crescent, where it describes the rivers that water the garden, the Euphrates, the Nile, the Tigris. In Genesis 3, it describes this location. So it's a broad area, what we might call now the Middle East, from Ethiopia into Egypt, into Israel, into Iran, Iraq, Syria. This is a broad. These are the places that are mentioned first and foremost in the fairly early part of Genesis. Even all of the stories that take place within Genesis and Exodus are all in these regions. From the Adam and Eve story to Noah, to Abraham, to Moses. They're all taking place in Africa, Israel, Iran, Iraq, all of these, what we call today, they call the Middle East.
Yeah, that's right. Assyria, Babylon, all that stuff we learn about.
All of that area. These are all the way the stories are concentrated on,
Yeah.
And what the Bible is trying to tell us is that something dramatically went wrong. What we call the fall of man, that separates man, that now man, he's lost his memory, and that's why he's doing it. Like we were just talking offline, we were talking about diversity and the separation of people and why people have lost memories and people have little bits of the story not in, and then the argument is which story is true. But everybody has, like we say, everyone has a deluge story throughout the whole of the world. No matter where you go, on every continent, you'll find a deluge story going back in ancient times, So I don't think there's a coincidence for that, or just by chance. This is human memory, like you say, and this is not found. Although now we find it in a book, but you can go to speak to people who don't have a book and give you the same story. So these are the things that are written in man's heart and in his memory. You understand? Just like people might say, "Oh, the Ten Commandments," but yet still, it's written in man's heart. Every man knows it's wrong to kill, to steal, to envy, or to covet.
Now, also, metaphors as well. For example, like whether it's in the religious book or whether it's on the walls in Kemet or whether it's whatever in the world. Sometimes people will write stuff just as metaphors where it's not exactly that exact event happened or at that time or sometimes people do stuff to explain, like in Kemet, like the story of the virgin birth to the scholars of like today that we deal with, or Diop even, for example, this story was not taken literally.
Yeah, it's not history, is it?
Yes, so this is why you see the things that like other places might have similarity. You see the virgin birth all over the world, well, a lot of places. But like I know with fathers like people like Andy Browder, Sheikh Anta Diop, and Rashidi, all the great Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark would say this was just a metaphor. It's not a true story. You get what I mean? So it's like some things, I look at like some things as like, there's a guide. It's a guide in life because of look at the world that we do live in. We do see some real bad things happening, don't we?
It is a good example.
Yeah, you know what I'm
We were
saying?
talking offline about creation. What we would say in the Orthodox Church is that the description of the story of creation is literally true, that God created the world, but it's not a description of how he done it.
Yeah.
It's given to us in a simplistic story so that we can understand that God is the creator and the master and the sustainer of all that we see. Okay?
Yeah.
And it's given in simple stories that a child could understand it, you know? So
Yeah.
therefore, I agree with you to an extent in terms of a lot.
Yeah, man. So, we have to finish off, and 40-10's had to go. So we're going to finish it off, and but we must continue sort of where we left off, and I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, about descriptions of God don't have a description, and this is I think anybody, if you look at many cultures in the world as well, sometimes people will make all different type of likenesses of God. And it's not the fact that anyone was wrong or right. It's a case of people trying to imagine what something looks like.
Yeah, I don't.
But these people, don't get me wrong, these ones that do accept they can't see it, but they know it's there. I'm not saying everybody in one bracket.
Yeah, I think what people are trying to express is the attributes of God.
Yes, that's it.
So even though you might have certain images or what we may look upon as idols now and stuff like that, I think they're trying to show an aspect of God's qualities and energies like we were talking about before.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
In their limited understanding at the time. No, I'm not saying that the ancients were more limited than us, because we in the modern time seem to have lost many of the rich values of a spiritual way of life, a natural way of life. We become very artificial in our attempts at life now, modern man.
Yeah.
And like you say, it does infringe on us, even though we're trying to break off them shackles of modern man thinks he's the be and end all of life. He thinks that he himself is, to an extent, much greater than the ancients. Yet still the ancients built pyramids. Yet still man can't build them things nowadays. But I think the point that we were trying to make was things are the way we describe it in Christianity is a secret place of the Most High. Like we were talking about the creation, how was it done? The descriptions given are not definite descriptions. They're given to our understanding because it's too big for us. It's just too big for us. Like you say, the scripture says the secret place of the Most High. Some of these things are known to the Most High or that prime mover only. And, like you say, man could search and he will never find out because his mind is not big enough to impact the essence of that prime mover. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
His mind would explode.
Yeah,
he couldn't take all the information.
Yeah, because I think it's when people start painting images, especially when it came to racism, for example, and God had to be white, Jesus had to be white, and basically a total whitewash of everything. So sometimes what people do is, they do a reverse of, it's like the reverse kind of thing where, because someone else is doing it, it's good for us to do. So let's paint a picture. But that's in some totally different way. I'm not even talking about the aspects of God, like we said before, all the different, whether there was different ways to explain through nature, But I think when the racism parts come in, that's just basically, it makes people react. It's like we were speaking about Pan-Africanism. It's like a reactionary of Eurocentric ideologies and behaviors.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think we shouldn't try and confuse some of these things when we're talking about
Yeah,
spirituality
yeah,
and these type of things, because they will shape our thinking. We're trying to get to the essence of what spirituality is, what
yeah,
what the divine is, or an understanding anyway. And yet still we know, throughout the ages, there's been different people who have ruled the world, from
yeah,
the ancient, from Sumeria to Egypt to Greece to ancient Babylon to the British Empire to
Rome,
now you could
everywhere.
say America,
Yeah,
or the Western world. The powers that be shape some of our thinking, and I think
yeah,
we should be able to separate what's going on today to the true essence of what we're trying to search for in that spiritual essence. Do you know what
yeah,
I mean? And so I wouldn't label it as European spirituality or African spirituality or Mesopotamian spirit, because man is a spiritual being himself. That is
yeah,
that is a truth. There's Man can't live without some form of spiritual essence or religion. I would use the word I was used, even
yeah,
though people don't like that word, because even people who say, "Well, I'm not religious or I'm not this," but yet still they live their life in a certain pattern. Your
yeah,
life might be going to the pub every day, but you do that religiously. You
yeah,
understand? People say they're not religious, but you get up every day, you get washed, you eat, you go to work. These are things that you're doing it in a religious way. You're doing it every day. You understand? So, like I said, religion just is something that binds, that brings together. That's what
yeah,
the definition of the word is.
yeah,
And
yeah.
many
I
of
know
us
what you
have.
mean. I totally understand where you're coming from. Like it's now when we look at, like, say, with spirituality, depending on what kind of spirituality as well. So, say for example, on you have a day where the main day, your main prayer day, you'll have a main prayer day in it.
Not every day.
Yeah, but isn't he like a main prayer? Like,
No, what you mean? You mean festivals and celebrations
yeah,
and we have we would have a liturgical year.
yeah,
That's what we would call it, liturgical year. Therefore, we celebrate certain events, okay,
yeah,
like Easter, like Christmas, like the
mm,
celebration of certain saints,
yeah,
or you know. Um, so yeah, so they are special days, but every day is a day lived out in your faith. The feast days, the fasting days, the festival days are no more important than today, where there may not be a festival.
yeah,
You
yeah,
understand? But um, in our Ethiopian faith, every day is important and every day is significant, and every day there has been an event. There
yeah,
has been somebody martyred, or somebody who we remember, some of the saints, people who have showed the example in their life, that we try and remember and emulate them. So, we don't just have 1 to 30, 1 to 31 or 28. Every day have a significance within our Ethiopian church in that sense. So there's not like special day of prayer, because every day is a special day of prayer. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
In that sense.
I think the big problem is the westernization of things. And what it is with westernization, it's also capitalism that's involved with it, which is
But I wouldn't call it.
part of the problem, not the only problem. I'm just saying that,
Yeah, well,
and things watered down.
yeah. Well, I think I know what you mean when you say westernization, because the Western world has brought secularism.
Yeah,
Seems to be the dominant focus for man, that has dominated the world. It's secular, and the word secular means non-religious, a world without God, a world without religion, A world without spirituality.
And
You
no
understand?
balance also. Like we have intuition on one side of our brain, and then we have the intellect. It's balanced where they favor the intellect and act like that intuition thing's a bit more like it's kind of like spookism, or it's not real. They lean more to this intellect kind of thing than where, you know, we've got parts of our brain that works differently. Creative side, you know, survival side.
I think we touched on it before, because in terms of when we're talking about, sometimes when we talk about, because the secular world believes science has all the answers, but science can only explain how things work. It doesn't give you the cause of things.
Yeah.
So that's where we use philosophy and we use theology to explain the cause of things and the prime mover. So sometimes if it can't be quantified and counted in the secular society that man has created, it's not real. And like I explained before, we can't see our breath. We can't see even what you've got there with the lovely scenery behind you. We can see the effect of the wind, but we can't see the wind itself.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that some of the things that are invisible are the things that are more important. And yes, some man plays them down. Even our words, we hear them, but we can't see them. And look how much power they can resonate amongst us.
Yeah.
You know, a word can break it or heal. You know what I mean?
Now, the physical just importance of the spiritual. If anything, you know, we could say the spiritual is more important. But as far as us just being, this is not just it. Like, this is just a part of us to be on this planet for so long. We need this physical body, like a bodysuit, to survive on it. And you think to yourself, well, we know that there's the hidden, there's the spiritual, but then we look at this physical body and think, well, how is this physical body made up of? It has to be all the elements that are on this planet, universe. And I don't mean to deal with apes or we came from this, and I'm not touching on nothing like that. I'm just talking about the elements of this, the ingredients of this planet to make the physical.
Well, we show that, you know, science can show us that we ourselves are from the earth.
Yeah.
Everything in the earth is in us.
And better yet, the ancients go back to the earth.
Yeah, well, everything, not just the ancients, even modern man knows that, where there people cremate the body, bury it in the soil, sail it out to sea and water, it's still going back to the earth. And but that's a philosophy, part of a natural thing that people do because of the belief system. But what I'm saying is that science can prove that man is the earth. You understand? The minerals and the things that we find in the earth are found in man's body as well, that we know that you know, it makes us up. So the question is why? You know, it always comes back to that why are we here? What is our purpose in life? You know what I mean? And like I say, the physical body, according to what we believe as Christians, is that it became, it fell from its grace. You know, we don't believe that the physical body was even made to die. You know, we believe that the spirit was put into it that give it the breath of life, and it was supposed to live forever, but it got out of sync with that prime mover, which we call God. It become out of sync, you know, without going into all the stories of the fall of man and what we receive from the scriptures, you know. But like I say, some of these things we say that the scripture is literally true, that God is the creator of all and created all. But some of the descriptions, the fine descriptions, it's unknown to man. How God created the sky that we see in the background, you know, the sun, the moon, the stars. These are beyond our comprehension. We can say, science can say, yeah, this exploded and that exploded, and but these are also surmisation as well, aren't they? Because nobody was there. Nobody was there.
it's the descriptions of things, you know what I mean? Like people can have their own descriptions. Like we can look at like if you want to look at a law, not the law of man, the law of the universe, you know. So
Mhm.
some people can't, you know, acknowledge what that is, but that's basically the law of God. But there's different languages that people speak. And when I say languages, I don't mean different languages. I'm talking about understanding. There's different understandings how we use our language to different people of different beliefs in order to be able to connect. If I go and visit a particular tribe, for example, I know that what I'm going into, and you know, I'm gonna try to be more understanding. I'm probably gonna hear all sorts of interesting stories, whether true, false metaphors, or just embedded into the family history or poetry or
Mhm.
singing or whatever they come from, you know. So I think that we've all got to have an open mind. It doesn't matter if you have religion, if you're science, or if you're just spiritual or other. Even some people who might not even some people godless, some people, if that's the word you want to use, atheist, then some people are. But I think it's you have to be in touch with something. If you're not in touch with something, you know, it's you're living in like a kind of the mystic type of world of like you know, I believe that we already knew what to do when we were first on this planet, and then down the line we strayed away from it. You know, whether it's from laws of God, you want to call it laws of nature, it's all the same thing, but it's
But
people are
yeah,
using it in different languages.
yeah. Well, I think from even just looking, and you don't even have to be a scientist to look at this. What man is doing to food, the way he produces food today,
Yeah,
with the GM crops, the way man messes with nature. He's trying to play God himself. You know what I mean?
mm.
And even when you even mention atheism and stuff like that, but yet still they have a belief practice. They have a form, a way of life, you know, that people say, well, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, but I believe in nature,
Yeah,
you know, and I believe in the elements, and I believe in this, and I believe in that, and, you know, so yet still they're believing in something which they believe is greater than themselves. You
yeah,
understand? So it's just that like I say, people don't want to be called religious, or even don't want to say the name God because of what they've seen in the last 500 years
that's
through
right.
what they would call institutional religion, mainly what people would know as Western Christianity,
Yeah,
you know? And
yeah,
that's where
yeah,
a lot of people put the blame, and 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 have just totally just lost interest in things that may benefit them. I'm not saying Western Christianity will benefit them in that sense.
yeah,
What I'm saying is that, you know, these are the things that they're really fighting against, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. No, it is. It is. I mean, interesting discussion. This though, you know, we'll have to wrap it up anyway. But I think there's just something that we can definitely build on, and then even in the future, we get a little discussion going on again. Some sort of like similar, but because I think when we're dealing with spirituality, you know, there's many angles people can come at, you know.
Yeah, and it's
So
passionate as well. It's
yeah,
passionate.
yeah,
Mm,
you know.
mm.
So we'll wrap it up though, and give thanks to Terence. You couldn't make it back and that, you know. So yeah,
Yes, yeah, truly, truly.
I look forward
Yeah,
to
man.
watching this back anyway, and I hope the
Yeah, me
people
too,
watching
James, man.
learns a few things. But I'll give thanks, Errol, man, to James the Bone
Yeah, man,
Discovering,
nice one.
dedicated to original peoples, man. And yes, we'll continue this. I think this is what we need to do: is get group discussions going, and then
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
see what unity can bring and ideas can bring, and you know, and then
yeah, because
bigger things
like
come.
you said, it doesn't always have to be a quarrel.
Yeah.
And we don't have to define them as Christianity,
Versus.
spirituality, science,
Versus. Yeah.
religion. You
Yeah.
understand? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Why can't they work together rather than it's
Find the
religion
commonality.
versus this?
Yeah, find the commonality.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed today anyway. I hope the listeners do
Me
as
too.
well anyway. But bless anyway, Errol.
Yeah, man. Give